Fam, what's good? Kyle Henderson, my boy Clint Lamb. Clint, happy New Year, man.
Yeah, man. How you doing today, Kyle?
I'm doing great, man. Let's jump right into this. Let's talk about Alabama's next quarterback following Bryce Young. You got Jalen Milroe returning. You got Ty Simpson. You got two very talented freshmen coming in. I mean, early on, is it too early to say that this is Jalen Milroe's team at quarterback, Clint?
Yeah, I definitely think it's too early. Now, granted, we've seen quarterbacks in the past make significant improvement, right? I mean, we've talked about this before on this show where, you saw Mac Jones, everybody got kind of counted him out of the quarterback competition, especially after that Auburn Iron Bowl performance. Even though I thought he played phenomenal outside of one poor throw, a lot of people felt like that the two turnovers, the two pick sixes ultimately made a huge difference in the game, and it did. But you saw him make substantial improvement, even though I think he was already a really good quarterback when he took over for Tua Tagovailoa. We saw Bryce Young come in and mop up duty, didn't perform very well during his freshman season. He obviously becomes Alabama's first ever Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. So I think it's way too early to count Jalen Milroe out of this competition, but at the same time, I also think it's way too premature to say that got a substantial lead. I think right now it's pretty much neck and neck.
Here with Clint Lamb of Bama Insider. My name is Kyle Henderson of Bama Insider. When you look at the Pro Football Focus, not a lot to work with from last season. And it was, the Bryce Young show this past year and the year before that. Clint, I have to ask you before we talk about Ty Simpson, there was a time where a lot of people didn't want Mac Jones to start. And people who watch our show and watch our videos, and we've even talked about this before, didn't want Mac Jones to start. Even wanted Bryce Young as a true freshman to start over Mac Jones. And then Mac Jones does a lot of progression, does a lot of work on himself, comes back and has one of the top seasons as a quarterback that we've seen and leads Alabama to a 13-0 season. There's a lot of speculation about Alabama getting a new offensive coordinator, and we'll bring you the news as it comes on Bama Insider. For right now, as of today, January 15th, it is Bill O'Brien, and we don't really, I know I don't anticipate Bill O'Brien being the OC at Alabama. You could feel different, but I mean, with Jalen Milroe, if are the intangibles there? I mean, clearly, when you look at this young man, the speed, the power, the size, I mean, he almost looks like Derrick Henry at the quarterback position. I mean, are the intangibles there? Do you think with enough work that he could be the quarterback that, Alabama hopes he could be?
Absolutely. I mean, he's got a lot of similarities to Jalen Hurts, and we all saw how he progressed. Now, granted, a lot of that progression happened at Oklahoma. A lot of that progression happened once he got to the NFL. He's not the same quarterback he was at any point during his time at Alabama. Even but all at the same time, though, he also continued to show development while he was in Tuscaloosa as well. I would say the only year to year where you really didn't see that you actually maybe saw regression was going from year one to year two. I thought he got very timid with the football during his second season. He was very worried about turning the football over. He thought, if I get in that sort of habit, Tua Tagovailoa is sitting there looking over my shoulder. Everybody wants him to start, so I need to be very careful and at least limit the turnovers. But I think limited turnovers also sometimes equals limited production for your offense. With Jalen Milroe, he's got it. I think he's too far the other way. He's not that sophomore Jalen Hurts. I think he's a little bit loose with the football. In less than 200 snaps played this past year or this season, I guess is what we'll still refer to it as. He had 5 turnovers, 3 interceptions, 2 fumbles. To put that into perspective, Bryce Young also had 5 turnovers, and he played over 700 snaps. I think, closed in on 750.
Yeah.
So you're turning the football over at a very high rate. You can't do that if you want to win this quarterback battle. You got to get safer with the football, make smarter decisions. But as far as I think his rushing ability, the fact that he brings a power element, Alabama wants to get more of a physical style on offense, and having that type of power runner at the quarterback position can certainly bring that as well as having that in your backfield with your running backs. But at the same time, there's some limitations throwing outside the numbers. There's some limitations as far as poor mechanics that leads to inaccurate passes, and there's some things that he's got to clean up. But at the same time, Ty Simpson's not a perfect prospect right now either.
Let's talk about Ty Simpson coming back. And when I first watched Ty Simpson's highlight tapes coming out, one thing that I really liked about him is his escapability, his ability to, extend plays. I mean, he has some really good footwork. And I think when you look at Ty Simpson, we didn't see a lot of Ty Simpson this last year, but when you looked at Ty Simpson as a prospect, he almost has some similar qualities that Bryce Young has in a sense that he can keep the play alive. Very mobile quarterback, doesn't have the biggest arm, but I think he is very accurate. Clint, what's your early take of Ty Simpson, and how do you see him evolving in this quarterback room moving into 2023?
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. The escapability, the ability to create plays off script, whether it be, both with his legs and his arm, and he can do both. And that's something that Bryce Young can do as well. I think Ty Simpson will probably be a little bit more willing to run the football. I think Bryce, due to his lack of size, really wanted to protect himself and prove to NFL evaluators, hey, I can avoid the big hits. You don't have to really worry about my size because I can do things to compensate for that. And then also when he would choose to use his legs, it would also make him that much more effective. But with Ty Simpson, like I said, very accurate passer. He can run more of that up tempo, RPO centric style of offense that Alabama's wanting to get more back to. And just a very talented player. Certain guys, and Joe Burrow was probably the perfect example of this, but certain guys thrive in chaos. Like it's not necessarily Johnny Manziel running around back there with really out of plan and just hoping something works out. It's more of thriving in chaos and being very under control and still having command in that chaos. And I think Ty Simpson does a very good job of displaying that, quality. And I think as he continues to grow as a quarterback and gets more comfortable, on the college level and in Alabama system, I think he can bring that to the table. And that's certainly something else I think that's going to contribute to the conversation as far as the quarterback battle.
Here with Clint Lamb, a Bama Insider. Definitely hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe, fam. Really important that you hit the thumbs up on these videos, and most importantly, that you subscribe to our content, talking about who will be Alabama's next quarterback going into the 2023 season. Before we move forward into our next segment, Clint, I want to get your take on the two younger quarterbacks that have enrolled at the University of Alabama. Your assessment of each of these guys when we go in, when we look at the prospects, when we look at the talent, what you have coming in. I'm really excited to see each of these quarterbacks. Tell our fans out there who are Alabama fans about each of these two early enrollees, the freshman quarterbacks.
Well, I think that neither one of them, they're not necessarily those like elite 5-star quarterbacks that a lot of these other class, a program is going to be added in their class. But I think the fact that you added two of them and they both have a lot of likable traits, they're very different styles of quarterbacks. I think you give yourself a good opportunity for at least one of the two to emerge as a quality starter down the road. And I also think it was very important for Alabama to add two in this particular class because you never know what's going to happen with your quarterback depth. Like if Jalen Milroe loses the battle in the spring, I don't think that's going to be determined in the spring or the summer, or maybe not even in fall camp. But if he loses the quarterback battle, it's also always possible that he can transfer. It's always possible that Ty Simpson, I don't think he was very, thrilled with the fact that he didn't get any playing time in the Sugar Bowl. I don't know that for a fact, but just, I saw him after the game. He didn't look happy. I think that's probably unfair of me to assume that that's what that was, but there could be a connection there. But the bottom line is he could also transfer too if he were to lose. So, I think adding two, you really want to always make sure that you're maintaining having 3 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. And Alabama, they didn't just add anybody. This isn't a Lane Hatcher late addition desperation thing. This is, two quarterbacks that they think very fondly of. And I think both of them, have an opportunity to eventually work their way into the starting job.
It was Clint Lamb, a Bama Insider. Definitely the thumbs up, like, subscribe. Okay, the last thing before we move to our next segment, I've asked Andrew Bone about this. I've talked to Jimmy Stein about this. I think you and I even talked about this. The potential, if there was a name to hop into the transfer portal at the quarterback position, does Alabama make a play, or do you think that these 4 quarterbacks that we have talked about are sufficient enough going into 2023?
It's got to be the right name. I don't think Alabama's just settling for anybody. If something does happen, if Jalen Milroe's not happy with the situation following the spring, if Ty Simpson isn't, and they choose or elect to enter the transfer portal, then, you're looking at, if it's Jalen Milroe, you're looking at 2 true freshmen and a redshirt freshman who has 30 career snaps. That is not a position you want to be in if you're Alabama. So at that point, then you start looking at guys, but at the same time, you've kind of got yourself in a situation where is there going to be somebody who's willing to come in? Now, granted, you can maybe argue, hey, Ty Simpson hadn't won this starting job, or Jalen Milroe hadn't won this starting job. The main competitor who was going to be in it, he's electing to leave, so we need somebody to come and compete. Maybe a guy would be willing to come, but I don't think it's going to be a headliner. It's not going to be anybody that's going to alter, your season. I think there's going to be limitations with guys in the portal, at least the guys who are currently in the portal. But, I think you reevaluate after the spring. I think right now you let these guys go through the competition and see how things work out.
Here with Clint Lamb of Bama Insider. Clint, we appreciate your work on Bama Insider. I know you've been tracking not only football, but the great job that the basketball team has done. We put out some basketball videos. Nate Oates talked for nearly 20 minutes. Go check out that video right now on our YouTube channel, as Alabama basketball is just phenomenal. But today we're talking football as we do here on Bama Insider. Hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe. Yesterday, some news came out just as Nate Oates' press conference was dropped, but it was about Tyler Harrell. And people kept asking us all season about Tyler Harrell, who was a transfer from Louisville, came to Alabama, only played 4 times, had 1 reception, I think, for 6 yards. He exits the program. But when you look to Alabama's wide receiver room, I want to ask you about a couple things. Number one, your take on Tyler Harrell. But when we look to Malik Benson joining Alabama's room, do you think that's going to bolster the entire unit? First, your thoughts on Tyler Harrell, on something that really never transpired here at the University of Alabama.
Well, on one hand, I get it. I get why he's entering the transfer portal. I think Alabama's, even though they've had a ton of losses, they've also, they've still got a lot of guys, right? I mean, I think right now I could probably rattle off at least 6 names who could very much be in that wide receiver rotation. Does Harrell want to compete to be, the 7th guy, or does he believe that Alabama's going to have 7 guys? But at the same time, now, granted, a lot of his slow progress was injury related, and I want to make sure that we're bringing that up because I think that was the main factor. But there was also some, issues picking up the playbook and learning the nuances of playing at the University of Alabama that he was, taking a little bit of time to learn. But at the same time, now that you're in the transfer portal, you got to go do that all over again. Wherever you end up, you got to learn a new playbook. You're in another new environment. You got more coaches that you have to get used to and learn from and see how they operate and how they tick. So, I think while I understand it on in one sense, I also think that maybe sticking around now that he did have the system, kind of down in the process, I think he would have been better in year 2, but I just don't know how much he would have played. So I think from either one of those 2 standpoints, I certainly get it. As far as Malik Benson, dynamic playmaker, it's 6 foot, I think I'm like 185 pounds, can really create after the catch, but he's also an elite vertical threat. He's got really long arms. He's got big hands, and, he's great. He's way better in contested catch situations than you would think for a guy who's only 6 foot, 185 pounds. And so I think he's one of the premier playmakers, offensive playmakers in this recruiting class, whether you're talking about transfer portal, high school, or JUCO level. And I can't even begin to state how important this addition was for Alabama's offense because they were lacking explosive playmakers or explosive plays, at least, for the entirety of the season. And that's exactly what this guy's going to bring to the table.
And that's what I agree with you, Clint. When we look at Alabama's wide receiver room and from this past and guys are returning, we can talk about a couple of other names before we move on to our next segment. But I just felt that Alabama couldn't really blow the top off like they could in years past. I mean, you look at some of these highlights right here. The first thing that screams out about Malik Benson is his acceleration and what he can do after the catch. You need somebody that can not only beat a receiver right here in man coverage, but blow the top off. And I felt that only one wide receiver was able to do that. And he was only a freshman. That was Isaiah Bond, right? We never really got to see too much from Aaron Anderson. And it's unfortunate that he left the wide receiver room. But when you look to guys who can really blow the top off, I felt like it was only Isaiah Bond that could really do that as a freshman. And, he just didn't get a lot of reps because there's guys ahead of him. Now, when we look to guys that are returning, Jermaine Burton or Ja'Cory Brooks, I think those guys are solidified as good wide receivers, but I don't feel that either. And this is no disrespect to those guys. They just don't have that NFL type speed that I think we're used to from the Jerry Judys, the Henry Ruggs, the Jalen Waddles, and et cetera. So I think that Malik Benson certainly has that extra gear that Alabama has needed, and I think will help the wide receivers. Let's talk about this wide receiver room before we move on. You got Ja'Cory Brooks coming back, probably someone who started to really emerge as one of the top targets towards the back end of the season. Give me your take on some of the wide receivers that are returning: Ja'Cory Brooks, Jermaine Burton.
Yeah, I think that, I don't think Ja'Cory Brooks or Jermaine Burton are necessarily wide receiver 1s. I think they're both good wide receiver 2s. That's where I think that there's an opportunity for a guy like Malik Benson to come in and really become the premier pass catcher in Alabama's offense. And then if that happens and he's, commanding all this attention from opposing defenses, that creates a lot more for your number 2 and number 3s. And in those instances, it would probably be Burton and it would be Brooks. And you're also going to have Prentice. You're going to have Isaiah Bond. You're going to have Kendrick Law. like I said, Alabama's not short on wide receiver talent at all.
Yep.
But with Brooks, I think his fit in Alabama's offense is interesting because you don't really see a whole lot of opportunities. Like Bryce
Mhm.
Young wasn't the style of quarterback where he's going to throw it up to a covered wide receiver and let him go up and win 50-50 balls.
Mhm.
He would like to see guys create separation through route running and win vertically before he throws it to him. And that's just really not Ja'Cory Brooks' game. I mean, he's got good speed, not saying that he's not a fast receiver. That's just not really how he wins, but he's actually very effective when he is given the opportunity in contested catch situations. And I would like to see a little bit more of that from whoever ends up being Alabama's starting quarterback. With Jermaine Burton, I agree with you. You look at him and you kind of wonder. Sometimes I went back and watched tape, and I was like, wait a minute, how was this cat as open as he was downfield?
Mhm.
And we do know that Bryce Young's arm was limiting the offense as far as their ability to stretch the field and push defenses or press defenses vertically. But Jermaine Burton won fairly consistently deep. So while I don't think he's an elite, he doesn't have the elite vertical speed. I think he's got really good speed, and I think he can win vertically. But you would want a Malik Benson or an Isaiah Bond being your premier guy, your Jameson Williams style of player.
Yeah, and I like the fact Chris, our producer in the background, has Kobe Prentice. I mean, what a season that Prentice had, right? I mean, that guy was completely reliable. He stood up when he had to. A lot of ability with Kobe Prentice. Can't wait to see what he can do in 2023. All right, on our next segment, I'm here with Clint Lamb, a Bama Insider. Definitely hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe. We're inching close to 90,000 subscribers here on our YouTube channel. It's very important that you subscribe, fam. So hit that subscribe button so every single time we get a video dropped right here on Bama Insider. We wanted to start kind of a Bama spotlight. And I don't know how much we're going to do this going into 2023, but we're going to get a couple of these out. And Alabama will have their fourth quarter program starting at the back end of January. It's when guys get together and basically just put in the work. It's kind of like the start of the new season. One guy that we want to start out with is Jaheim Oatis. You look at Jaheim Oatis, and as a freshman, he came in, and right there's that old adage that freshmen don't play at Alabama, but he played. And so did a lot of guys. I mean, we see that every single year. But 6'5", 350 pounds. He's a freshman. Did a lot of work on his body, really got himself ready to be, called on when he was needed. And you look to the season that he put together, 29 total tackles, 10 of those solo, 19 assisted. Let's talk about Jaheim Oatis a little bit here, Clint, and kind of spotlight this young man.
Well, I think the first thing that stands out about him, I guess the first thing would be his sheer size. I mean, he's massive, but he was a lot more massive, I guess is the way to put it. When he first got to Alabama, he was north of 400 pounds. And I think that the first indication to us that this guy is going to be ready to contribute in year one was the fact that he worked so hard and had put such an emphasis on losing the weight that the coaching staff asked him to.
Mhm.
That's a substantial amount of weight to go from 400 plus to 342, I think is what he was listed at.
Mhm.
I think he might have even ended the season south of 340. I'm not entirely sure about that, but I did speak to someone that said that he did get under 340, but that's 70, 80 pounds.
Mhm.
And that's not easy in the amount of time that he did it. And
Mhm.
not only did he do that, but he also, some of the explosiveness, like he was already a very athletic player, a surprisingly athletic player for a guy who was 400 pounds, 400 plus pounds in high school. You see him lose, 70 plus pounds, and now he's even more explosive and he's even more dynamic as far as, being able to push the pocket. And, he's kind of still has the look of like a space eating, run stopping, interior defensive lineman, but he's also a really big athletic mover, great first step quickness. Like I said, he can push the pocket.
Mhm.
And I'm excited. I don't think he'll ever get north of like 60% of the snaps. He's still a big guy.
Mhm.
So kind of like Jordan Davis, who was a very impactful player when he was in there. You still don't want to give that guy 70% snap share, like you've seen from some Alabama defensive linemen. But the fact that he was a true freshman, I mean, he was dominant against Kansas State in the bowl game. And I think he continued to get better throughout the year. And just a very encouraging player, for a defense that needs guys like that to stop the run.
Here with Clint Lamb, Obama Insider, with spotlighting Jaheim Oatis. Before we bounce out here, Clint, and we have 400 people online, we'd appreciate 400 thumbs up. Chris, if you could get something going real quick for the basketball team, because I want to highlight what Nate Oates is doing. I mean, yesterday was unbelievable as Alabama beats LSU 106-66 to remain undefeated in SEC play. Clint, tell me your thoughts on Brandon Miller, because I said yesterday on Twitter, and someone corrected me. I was like, this is the best freshman in America. And someone said underneath me, they're like, best player in America. Give me your take on Alabama basketball. It's something that we haven't seen in such a long time. Now 5-0 in SEC play. I mean, 106-66. My goodness. I was watching the 49ers at the same time. Both things are going well for Alabama, for the 49ers. Your take on Alabama basketball after that 40-point victory over the Tigers?
It was, I think yesterday, a lot of people, anybody that's had question marks as to whether or not Alabama might have the best team in the country, I think that they're in everybody's conversation now. And Brandon Miller, certainly, he's the headliner, right? I mean, he does so many different things for you on the defensive end and offensive end. And the fact that, he continues to get better as well. Like, I don't think he's the same player that he was at the beginning of the season. And it is wild. And I don't, it's possible that Alabama doesn't have the number 1 overall pick in the NFL. It might be Bryce Young. It could be Will Anderson. But, at the same time, I mean, I think it's very realistic that they do end up having the number 1 pick. And now it's possible that they could have the top pick in the NBA draft too. And for a school that's really been known for football, what Nate Oates has done as far as getting those guys to play hard, they all play together. There's been nights where Brandon Miller has been a little bit off and he hadn't done extremely well. And Alabama's continued to find ways to win in those games. And I think that's huge. This team right now, everybody talks about the fact that they feel like they're peaking too early. Mm-hmm. To me, I think they are continuing to get better. Like, I don't even think right now with where they're at is where they could be here in a couple of months. So this is a very exciting group, and it's certainly led by Brandon Miller.
Alabama shot 46% from the field, 37% for the 3-point attempts. It's just pretty incredible. 16 of 20 free throws. And this coming week, they'll be on the road as they take on Vanderbilt, and they also take on Missouri. So just wanted to quickly get your take on that. I mean, it's really amazing to see that the job that Nate Oates continues to do here at the University of Alabama. Credit to the Alabama basketball fans for riding with this program, because we are seeing something that we quite frankly have not seen before. We'll bring it back to full screen as me and Clint here exit out, but we want to talk to you today about the quarterback position, and then we wanted to talk to you about the wide receiver room, get your take on that. And we also threw a spotlight on Jaheim Oatis, because we do feel that when he's one of the most impactful players returning on the defensive side. And then also kudos to the Alabama basketball team. You know where to find us, back at Bama Insider. I hope you have a beautiful Sunday with your family, and you can catch us back at Bama Insider. Hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe. He's Clint Lamb. I'm Kyle Henderson, coming to you from beautiful Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Probably have a day off tomorrow, even too. We don't, but you do, right here on BamaInsider.com.